Hello and welcome to HUDL Up, the podcast from HUDL, where we're holding space for real stories, shared power and collective change. HUDL works alongside young people, organisations and communities to create fairer systems and better opportunities, not just for young people, but with them. And this podcast is where those stories come to life. Each episode, we'll hear from young leaders, practitioners and partners who are reshaping how decisions are made and programmes are designed. Together, we'll explore what it takes to build equitable partnerships, share power meaningfully and create change that lasts. We believe that when young people are involved at every stage, from design and decision-making to delivery, systems become fairer and communities stronger. So let's huddle up and get started with today's episode. And we are joined by the wonderful Melanie de Silva Pinto and Daniel Seifu.
Hey.
Hi. It's not almost impossible to pin you two down because obviously you're very incredible people and you're doing a lot. I've been looking forward to this conversation. In order to kind of get our listeners acquainted with who you are, can we start with this question, which is, can you share a bit more about your connection to HUDL and what you're doing at the moment? And what does that actually look like on a day-to-day basis? Who are you? Who would like to start?
Oh, feels a bit daunting.
Mel, since you chimed in there, would you like to go?
Yeah, sure. My connection to HUDL is through the Involving Young People Collective, the IYPC. And we work closely with the Esme Fairbairn Foundation to work together on ways to include young people more in the conversation and also just ways to improve their funding practices in general. In my day-to-day, I am a political educator. And so I help people understand activism and place themselves in it, ways that they would like to change the systems that impact them, ways to build community and compassion with each other. And then also I am a jiu-jitsu kids coach. And so my passion is facilitation, and I like to bring kind of both of my passions for jiu-jitsu and political education together to kind of help young people understand their own bodies and connect to their own bodies, and then also build emotional regulation practices and just kind of help them to understand how to treat other people, but also how to treat themselves. And that's the beauty of martial arts, is that it really places a lot of emphasis on respect and discipline and care. And those are things that I love as a person. That's what my day-to-day looks like.
It's incredible to hear. And I think it's always nice to kind of hear what people are doing sort of outside of this work and outside of the IYPC. So thank you so much for sharing. Dan, over to you. What's your connection to HUDL and what are you doing at the moment and what does that look like day to day?
I was just reflecting on that. I came across HUDL in 2020. It was middle of lockdown. A call out at the bottom of a random email that said, do you want to come and help co-design something with this foundation? And I remember messaging Keji being I need to finish my dissertation. I can't come to the information session, but can I still apply? And you said, yeah, I can apply. And I remember being really glad that I did send that email, because I then applied and was then part of the first cohort of the Involving Young People Collective, and worked closely alongside Keji and the people at HUDL and the other really, really great people at IYPC, who many are really close friends now, for 3 years. Yeah, working alongside as a kind of a critical friend to Esme Fairbairn. Quite cheesily, I mark that moment of my involvement in IYPC as it was definitely one of those sliding doors moment, because I think if I had not been involved in this way, I probably would be doing something very different, because I've gone on to work in philanthropy and to work in funding, and I'm now a program officer at Tudor Trust, where we're working through the lens of racial justice and systemic change to resource power within communities through grantmaking. And so I'm only able to do this role now because of everything that I learned with HUDL and with RPC as a young person kind of over those years. And yeah, I guess for HUDL, I also when I left RPC about 3 years ago, I continued supporting HUDL and as a HUDL associate, and have done roles such as leading the FCC Communities Advisory Board. I can't remember the full name. It's been a while.
I think what you're trying to say is the Co-op Foundation's Future Communities Collective.
I could just
Well,
the acronyms, but I couldn't
Too many
remember.
names.
to be fair, yeah, there's so many names, so many acronyms. Yeah, I'm like, do you know what? As you were saying it, I was like, I'm gonna bet if Dan can remember exactly what the acronyms were.
So IYPC, FCC, I don't know. There's a lot of CCCs going on. I don't know. But yeah, I'd had a great time. Like also using that learning from working with Esme to then go on and support other young people in other foundations and to be a facilitator in those spaces. So it's been a long and like great journey with HUDL.
Amazing. So in terms of like our conversation today, it's going to be interesting because Mel, you're about to step out of the collective, and Dan, obviously, you've been away from it for quite some time now, right? So there's going to be some very interesting reflections. So actually, talking about that, Dan, you stepped away from the IYPC in 2023. So how would you each describe your relationship with the IYPC now, alongside other work and projects?
I think my relationship with IRPC has, I mean, it's been 3 years now that I've been a part of the IRPC alumni. And I think there was sort of following leaving, a group of us actually also moved on to being panel members on the advisory boards for the different 3 strategic areas in Esme Fairburn.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a year, I was on the Our Natural World advisory panel before stepping back. I think for me, my like connection to IYPC really is just I constantly refer back to it in terms of youth participation done right in this space and the kind of the way in which it supported me to really want to like challenge power, to look at institutional philanthropy through a different lens, and to try and to see that there's value in me like working in this area and using my skills to try and support this sector. So I think it's sort of my connection is now in the work I do in a different trust and sort of bringing a lot of those values and things that I learn into that work and thinking how we can build participatory processes within grant making or sort of looking at how we can really hold ourselves accountable and to sort of bake in like collective models of grant making that I think we need more of. So I think that's how I feel I connect to it.
Amazing. Thanks, Dan. So Mel, so you're in a slightly different position in that you're still in the role, but you're due to leave. So for you, how would you describe your relationship with the IYPC now alongside the other work that you're doing?
I have loved every second of being a part of the IYPC. It's helped my personal development quite a lot. And then also just professionally, it's taught me so much about being in funding spaces because I'd never had access or even thought I would have access to these spaces. And it feels a bit bittersweet because I know it's coming to an end. And so I want to get as much done as possible. But also something that we kind of pride ourselves in is taking our time with the work and not rushing into things. And so it's that balance of wanting to get it all done, but also knowing that the best things come when you give it time. Yes.
No, I was about to say something, but go ahead, carry on.
No, I would love to hear what you want to say, Keji.
Well, actually, I was going to say the next question I was going to ask is kind of around that transition, right? So you talked about the fact that, you know, next couple of months, it's all really about trying to get as much as you can, but then also honoring the kind of slowing down and the pause moment. So for you, in terms of your transition from the IYPC, how are you kind of experiencing this moving on period or preparing to move on period?
I mean, I've already asked you for a job. And so clearly I don't want to move on. But it's great. I feel like this isn't the only kind of collective that I'm a part of that's coming to an end. And so it really feels like I'm stepping into a new phase. And so I really want to be intentional with that step out and step into the new phase. Like I'm thinking a lot for myself. What does the next 3 years look like for me? And a lot of what the IYPC has taught me is really living through your values. And I really appreciate that we come back to our values so much at the IYPC because just in any sector that you're involved in, any work that you do, I think you should always be working through your values and really like living it boldly and loudly. And so the transition is, I haven't thought too much about what the next steps are. I really want to put my attention and my love into these last few months in the IYPC where we're planning a lot of stuff. And so I want to give it my all so that I feel like when it ends, I feel like I've really been intentional with it.
I hear that. Thanks, Mel. Dan, I'm asking you to go 3 years back in time. What was the experience of moving on? What was that like for you, and how did you kind of prepare for that?
Yeah, I definitely remember not wanting to let go. I feel like there was something around, yeah, not wanting to let go because I think there was something that we'd created that was really like, that felt so like special and like, so I think I've just learned so much from the IYPC and HUDL about like what it means to kind of work in a collective where you're really building community, you're like building everyone's confidence and strengths. And like, I think HUDL's approach to creating joy within the work and being like silly and serious at the same time is like something that I miss in some ways as well. But then actually, that's one thought. I think the other thought I remember feeling 3 years ago was a kind of sense that the longer you spend in these kind of spaces, the more like you're at risk of becoming institutionalized, right? And like the power is being able to be fresh and be able to critique and question things in a way that really challenges why things are done in a certain way. And
Yeah.
I think spending too long in certain spaces like that, I think can make you like you start giving excuses already, but like where maybe they don't need to be. And so I think there's a risk of that. And I'm even conscious about that now at the moment of like still working in funding, about making sure I'm always accountable and that I'm not becoming institutionalized in that sense.
I resonate with what you're saying, Dan, because I've been in kind of youth spaces for my whole life, and I've really enjoyed the space that we create with the IYPC, because it is that balance between silliness and still getting the work done, and it shows that you can have a lot of fun and still get the work done, and the work is even better because it's been so authentic. The process has been so authentic. And yet now, as I'm moving into kind of like my later 20s, I'm now moving into this space of, I'm still youthful. I want to carry that with me forever. But those spaces, I'm not having as much access to those spaces anymore. I'm now kind of the older facilitator in the space, or I'm moving into these more professional sectors. And I'm not sure on how to still bring that way of working with me, but moving into these more, I don't know if you can call it like a more serious stage in life. I'm not sure if that's what I would call it. That's the only thing that comes to mind right now. It's not a worry. It's more of just I'm in that transitional period, as we're calling it, on like how to still be in those spaces, but no longer be classed as really a young person.
Yeah, I hear that. Something that, Dan, that you said that I wanted to pick up on, right, was so your cohort that came in 2020 were the one that negotiated the 3-year term. And it was initially when we had those conversations, those early day conversations, it was because you guys were brought in for 10 months. And then we knew that actually as soon as we got started with the work, we were like, 10 months is not enough. It has to go be much longer. Then we said like a year wasn't enough because you were still kind of getting your head around the partnership, the work, just kind of understanding like how the sector works, right? And then we said 2 years, what the projects are kind of just only getting started. So you haven't really had a chance to sink your teeth into it. So that's where we were like, 3 years is the ideal term, right? And interestingly, I was having a few one-to-ones last week, and some of the current IRPC members were saying that they're feeling the same way in terms of like that not wanting to let go. So Mel, that feeling that you were describing, but also recognizing that it's also time to do so. And I'm just wondering, like, what's your thoughts and what's your feelings about that 3-year term? So Dan, looking back on that, do you think that was about right? And Mel, also for you, kind of like, does it feel, even though I guess it feels a bit daunting, or it might be kind of like a loss, but like, how do you both feel about that?
I think the 3-year term works, and I think the reason why it works is because we had that like staggered phase, and like not everyone was leaving at the same time, and so there was that kind of like overlap with different key people. Because I think, as much as I'd say it's really valuable that you have young people coming into this fresh and who are like learning, and like the knowledge that they're gaining and like enables that power to be that critical friend and to hold the organizations they're working in accountable. I think you also want to learn from like the past people's mistakes, or learn from what the young people that have come before you have like experienced. And so I think there's like having that bridge is really key. Having those people that have but I think 3 years worked for me, and I think it was a good term. Yeah. I wouldn't have asked for more. I think I was ready to leave when we did leave.
Yeah, I agree. I think 3 years feels right. I think it gives enough time to understand the work and to kind of place yourself in the work. And so we've created a lot
Mm,
in those 3 years I've been part of the collective. I feel like we've created a lot, and now it gives a chance for the new collective members to create something new themselves. And you want to have a balance where if you're there for too long, I don't think you'll learn from each other as much. But it's nice to have these new collective members coming in. And like Dan said, it's never just everyone leaves and then you're left with just two people on the table. No, there's always a full table. So it's
mm.
really nice to kind of just hand over the work to a new group of people and see what they do with it.
Amazing. Thank you. So we're currently at the point where we are recruiting for the second half of the collective as your cohort is about to step out. And I'm sure that we're going to have some people listening in on this and thinking about, well, what is it that what do they need to kind of hold on to, or what do you think is important for them to kind of have at the forefront of their mind, I guess, essentially when they're coming into this role and doing this work? Dan, you've unmuted, so I'm going to come to you first.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think I would say that with this kind of environment, like you give what you get, and like it's like sort of going in with that kind of open mind and knowing that all the tools are there, like there is that support there to support with that transition or bridge into the role, and then like it's just learning. Like as I would remember just being a sponge in that first year of just like the knowledge and the awareness of like, oh right, so that's how it works. Like I sort of had been in organizations that had received funding, and you hear about the decisions about like how funding is influencing the organizations that you're in, or like youth organizations that I was in, and then being in an organization that's making those funding decisions. It was like just so much knowledge, and that like knowledge is power, I guess, isn't it? So it's that kind of leaning in and knowing that like as time will go, like confidence will grow, skills will grow, and you're not expected to arrive and just be like some full package that is like ready to start doing whatever. I remember when I first facilitated, we did a round table with other funders who were involved working with young people.
Yeah.
I remember facilitating it in the height of lockdown, and I was nervous. I remember Keji was like messaging me in the background, like offering support, and I was like just holding the space. And then I remember being very nervous. And I think like by the end, it was like doing something like that felt really natural and easy, and I could ask for support where I needed it. And I think like that was the 3 years of like just developing skills and trying out new things. And it's a perfect space to get thrown into things with the right support and to learn on the job and to be around interesting, dynamic, like a range of people from different backgrounds that all bring different things, and like learning how to be in community and work in the collective, like all these things you kind of just learn as you go, I think. And I think that's the kind of the beauty of it. The other thing I would say is that like for that from the young people side, I think there's also like the staff of organizations you're working in, I think also will also receive you, and also like often need to be prepared to like support you and to meet you where you're at, and to know that you're going to go at your own pace at times, and there's other times that you're going to surpass what they're expecting and all this kind of stuff. And so it's a balance of expectations, right?
Yeah, definitely. Mel, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think leaning in is really important to that, and asking the question, not placing too much importance on how you phrase it, how it comes out, what exactly it means. Just ask the question. And I think the more you do it, the more confident you become in your own skills to be able to vocalize what you're saying, but also to just ask, because if you don't ask, you don't get. If you don't ask, you don't know. And so it's important to just do it. And I think also be flexible with yourself, and know that you're not gonna, like Dan said, you're not gonna show up as the full package. And you don't have to be the full package, because you're there to fill in the gaps. You're all there together as a collective, as a group, as a community, to be able to fill in the gaps for each other. So you're not supposed to know everything. You come in with something, with a skill, with a question, with an experience. And so give that, and with time you'll learn the rest, and you'll
Mm,
find the other skills that you're like, oh, I actually really like that. I want to learn that too. I want to do that too. I think you only kind of get that if you give yourself the grace and the flexibility to just show up and give what you have. Yeah, I think also it's important, I think, to hold, I don't know if I want to say joy or care, because I a lot of the times I place them kind of together, because, experiencing joy is a part of caring for yourself and caring for other people. And I think when you go into this work, it doesn't always have to be work, 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 work. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes it can also just be fun and go in ready to have that fun and to create joy with other people, because that's where you find some of the like best roles, best skills, best just like time.
Yeah, yeah. We're starting to interview. Huddle is very much in recruitment phase right now. And a question that I get a lot from people who are coming into these roles is what makes the best advisor, or what makes an ideal advisor? And I sometimes struggle to answer that, because I'm just like, you just kind of need to come and be yourself and be willing to learn and be curious. And I'm just curious what you would be saying to someone who asked you that question on if you were in interview mode.
I mean, immediately what came to mind was just the will
Mm,
to learn, the will to show up. Like that's, for me, I didn't have much funding knowledge at all, really. I came from the other side where I was just showing up to programs, delivering programs, and just vibesing off money we already had. I didn't
mm,
know what it took to get that money, and I didn't care. Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then I went to the other side and I thought, wow, this takes a lot of work. This takes a
Mm,
lot of work to be able to secure these funds. There's a lot of thought that goes behind it. And if I didn't just go for it and just think, I just want to learn. I want to be a part of people. I want to be a part of a group of people who are just there to just share a dream together. It was just my willingness and what you said, Keji, that curiousness.
mm,
I think that's really important to have, to just be curious.
yeah. Thanks. Dan, do you want to add anything?
The word I was inquisitive, which is basically curious. Like like the kind of inquiry and the showing up feels really important. I think also this like being practice, not perfection, right? It's like it's about showing up to try and build something together, and to be okay with like making mistakes and like, or asking for support when you need it. Like, I think these are things that I think it's been one of my big learnings actually over the last few years. I've just been like, it's not about, oh, you need to produce this and it's all about the goals and the end product. Actually, the process of how you get there and the how is so important. And there's so much value in like how much you can add to that, and how much you can learn from that as well. The kind of the practice of doing things, which is, I think that's where the richness is.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So we've focused in on young people. So I want to just move a little bit to organizations. What do you notice about how organizations approach working with young people based on the different environments that you've worked on? So IYPC in jiu-jitsu, Dan in like, different organizations that you're kind of working with at the moment. Yeah, what are you noticing about organizations in terms of their approach with working with young people?
I have personally seen a lot of different ways of bringing in young people to the work.
Mm,
And I'd say the best ways that I've seen is when you lead with the understanding that young people know what's best for them
mm,
and they know their experience the best. Although they may not sometimes know how to communicate that with you, or the ways of communicating might not be the best way for them in the long term, they know what they're experiencing. And so when I've worked with organizations that kind of just meet young people where they're at and meet them with a lot of support, with a lot of care, with a lot of just like good vibes, it
mm,
kind of creates the environment for young people to open up, because it's natural that a lot of young people can be a bit closed off sometimes with their own experiences. And
mm,
so I've seen organizations who try to force that experience out of young people and end up creating quite like environments that aren't very safe or trauma informed. But then I've seen on the other side where organizations just create really fun environments, and they also create environments that, has food, creative experiences or experiences in nature, and
mm,
just kind of give to young people space to explore and to
mm,
experiment. And then that naturally brings young people out of maybe their bubble or whatever is holding them back. And I think also when organizations are very transparent with young people, with what they can offer and what their work is, I think that helps. I've seen a lot of young people, it helps them take more leadership roles, because they're like, oh, okay, I know what I'm getting myself into. I know what I've signed up for. I know what's available. So
mm,
here's what I can give as well. There's no hidden agendas. And so that also builds a lot of trust. And I've seen young people really take on a lot of roles that they might have not in the past, simply because they just felt like, okay, I can trust this organization because they're telling me what I need to know.
Amazing. Thanks, Mel. Dan, anything you want to add to that?
I don't think so, no. Maybe one final bit is that I've seen organizations really work with young people and not just put them in boxes as like they're young people, so they're going to talk to young people issues, right? And like an example is that I became a trustee of an organization like when I was 24, and they never actually once said, "Oh, you're a young trustee," but they offered a lot of support and like mentoring and like alongside that role. And then I remember introducing myself once as a young trustee, and I was like, "Oh, why? Like I'm here for my experience, and that's good enough. Like, yes, I've received extra support. Yes, I don't have the same level of like governance knowledge as someone else, but there's a kind of recognition that like what I bring is valid, and it's not just going to be put in a box as like, oh, that's young people experience." I think that could be quite powerful.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. There is a lot of power in that. And I think those labels sometimes can just really invalidate people, because although you may be young, there's so many other experiences that aren't connected to just your youth. And if you're just coming from a perspective of you are just here because you're a young person, it completely strips the rest of your identity and the rest of your experiences. And so I really value when organizations just talk to you like you're just a person. You are just a person. And that's good enough.
I mean, it's interesting that you both are mentioning the kind of the young person and sort of how you introduce yourself, because I guess more recently we've been looking at language, and we've been looking at whether we call people youth advisors, young advisors, like is that is that needed? And we've kind of started to strip the youth and young advisors part out, and we kind of just put the age bracket in terms of, because at the end of the day, we are being funded to recruit and support young people within a certain age, right? But do they then need to be introduced as young advisors or youth advisors? Like, I'm not quite sure. I'm sort of really up in the air about it. So it'll be interesting to hear what your thoughts are on that, actually.
I think it depends on the environment, right? Like, I think there's a way I can see certain groups or collectives where sort of claiming that actually gives you more license to be like stronger and more powerful, and to move with more agency, right? If you feel like, right, we're naming ourselves as this, I guess it's like if you make that choice, then that's very different to being someone else putting you in that box and saying, "Oh, okay, you're a young person, you can only speak to these issues." Whereas it might be that, yeah, I think it depends who's doing that naming, which I think is important.
Yeah, I hear that. I mean, more often than not, though, right, is we have to we label it in order
Mm.
to like promote or advertise that role. And we do. I think one of the first things we do in onboarding is just sense checking whether everyone's happy with the name, because ultimately this is, and the language, because it's going to be used kind of like throughout, right? But yeah, I'm increasingly sort of like when I'm typing, I'm like, why are we calling it this? Like, I'm not quite sure why we're doing that. But it's interesting what you say in terms of like it can give agency, it can give more power, I guess, essentially sometimes. Mel, what about you? What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I can understand both sides to it. I think as well, when I think about it through an experience side of the sector, not of your experiences, but of the sector. When I was coming into it, I was so fresh. And so I did feel like I didn't understand enough to just be like a consultant. Cause I was like, what even is a consultant? Oh my gosh, like I need to read up on this. And as you have more experience, then, you can be called senior and all of these other words that come before the actual job title. So I can understand it from the lens of, if you've just come into a sector and you don't yet understand a lot about it, to have that kind of initial, I don't know if youth would be the word before it, but to have something that says like, I have just started and I'm still learning and understanding.
Mm,
But also, I do think at times it causes people to not take you so seriously. And so that then can be internalized very easily. And so I don't think, by being called a youth consultant, for example, I don't feel any less than anyone else. And
mhm,
yet at times people have spoken to me as if I was less than because of
mm.
it. And so I think it's more how other people speak to you because of it, or treat you, rather than more of how I took the name.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear that. So then the question I want to ask you both then is, And Dan, in terms of like, I guess how you respond is whether you're kind of responding from a place of when you were in the IYPC or just where you are now. But how do you understand your influence in the spaces that you're in now? Because we've mentioned the word power quite a bit, right? So how do you understand your influence in the spaces that you're in now as a young person? Because you're still young.
I'm very conscious that I feel like maybe this is as a young person, maybe it's just my values, but like I sometimes to my detriment find I'm like, I don't know, for want of a better term, like the progressive voice in the room, right? Like I'm speaking from a certain lens. Maybe it's not the like super pragmatic, realistic lens. It's like, what if we could dream of this? Like, what is the world as it should be? And like, how are we trying to reach that point? And maybe that comes with age. Maybe that comes more with my like politics, like whatever it is. I'm very conscious that, yeah, like historically, I feel like I've sometimes been that person in the room, which I think that leads to influence and impact, right? I think it does also make me very conscious about the rooms that I'm in and very aware whether it's right for me to be that person, because it that can be quite taxing. And if you feel like you're the one who's constantly saying, yeah, but why are we not thinking it like this? Like that there's a kind of, maybe there can be a bit of a burden sometimes in having that perspective and trying to be the one maybe like shaking things up a little bit and just being like, well, hold on a minute. This is the status quo position. Why are we making decisions based on like business as usual? Like this is how it's always been done. Like doesn't mean we can. So being that voice, I think I'm sure it comes from all those experiences I've mentioned, but and I'm sure it links to influence, but I'm also maybe do find that like sometimes a bit of a burden, or I use it to influence whether I question whether I should be in that room at all.
Okay. Great, thank you. So Mel, how about you? Does any of that resonate with you? Like, how do you understand your influence in spaces now?
It does resonate. From young, I've always been kind of the challenger in the space. I love to just ask the question that hasn't been asked on why we're doing it that way, where that comes from, you know. And I agree, it can be really taxing, especially if you're kind of the only person in the room carrying that conversation. I love to dream. I think it's really important to always dream of the world as it should be, even if that it's not shared with other people, to just think for yourself, what would that world look like?
Mm,
And that informs a lot of my challenging and the questions I ask. I think I've learned a lot from my experience that I don't always have to say it all, and that it's important to feel the room that you're in, and that actually at times if you leave space for it, someone might also ask the question. And
mm,
so yeah, I've learned to also reframe how I ask the question. I found that as I was growing up, it came out very direct and at times aggressive. I was like, why don't you see the world how I see the world? Um,
mm,
and actually, at times that like pushes people away. It doesn't actually bring people in. And a lot of this work is bringing people in and sharing that dream. And so I've learned a lot that in rooms, if you just kind of ask a question here and there, if you maybe reframe something in a different way, if you kind of plant the seeds of imagination, that a lot of people will kind of start to come with you on that journey of dreaming. And suddenly you'll be in a completely different space to when you first started the conversation. And so that's how I like to kind of now put my my energy into those spaces, because Dan is right. It can be so taxing to feel like you're fighting everyone in the room for something. And so I wanted to just reframe and not make it a fight anymore.
mm, mm. So that's interesting. And while we're kind of like on the topic of learning, the question that I wanted to ask is, Dan, like with a bit of distance for you, definitely, and Mel with it being, I guess, being a little bit closer, what feels clearer to you across your journey in terms of what you're learning and what you're taking away or have taken away, should I say?
Working in different spaces around like youth participation in the sector, I think I've come to realize that change is always not linear. Like it's changes, like it trying to change something takes time. You need to have joy as well as there's really serious, intense conversations. There's something about like the working with complexity and with so many different stakeholders. Like I think there's young people, there's the facilitators, there's middle management, there's like CEOs, there's trustees, and all of them have completely different understandings, or maybe not. Maybe sometimes there's much more alignment in certain areas than others. And trying to find a way in which people are speaking from the same sheet as much as possible, right? From a values point of view, from a kind of behaviors point of view, I think that is really important because so much time and energy can go into like just trying to shift one part of it, but actually there's a much more powerful part somewhere else that isn't getting any interaction, right? With the conversations. They're really powerful. Like you talk about these conversations that you've been facilitating, Mel, around like dreaming into like what could be possible. And like if all the young people are having those conversations, great. But like if no one with actual decision making power is influenced by that or is in those rooms, then it's sort of like we're just speaking into our same echo chamber, right? So I think that's definitely been a reflection of like, yeah, where you put your time and how you make sure the right people are in the right rooms.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's we speak a lot about intergenerational learning at the in the IYPC, and it really comes back to that is understanding the power dynamics of the spaces you're in, but also, you know, if you are just always in the same echo chamber, it's like you said, Dan, like it's not going to go anywhere else. You know, you're creating this really nice vibe, but if we want to create real systemic change, we have to start inviting people into the conversation. And my journey in the IYPC has really solidified that for me, to constantly invite people into the conversation and to meet people where they're at, because people have different levels of power in these institutions. And, you know, coming in thinking, like assuming that you already know where the conversation is going to start from, sometimes it starts in a completely different place and you actually have to adjust pretty quickly. And so coming in with no assumptions, but just with that dream and that willingness to have that conversation and to hold each other in that space, I think the IYPC does that really well. And I've really enjoyed watching it and also being able to experiment with it myself.
Something else, I actually can't remember what your question was, Keji, but I think we're on a roll. But
it doesn't matter. Go on.
But that working as part of a collective with people from like with such a diverse range of perspectives and views is so important. Like I've definitely been in a lot of collectives and spaces where everyone's just like aggressively agreeing with each other, and that's just like, well, this is great. Like whereas actually that constructive kind of healthy challenge of like having different views, I think is like when it's done in a generative way is so important. And like that's definitely something that I carry forward, being like, I love it when we disagree, because I'm like, I want that, like, let's get to the bottom of this. We can have a disagreement and let's try and understand each other, because but in doing that, like that's the process, right? Like the process of trying to like understand each other and really like move forward there's just so much richness in like meeting each other and finding that middle ground.
Absolutely. I love conflict so much. Maybe it's my martial arts background, but I enjoy clashing so much, because if it's held with love, because you still want to move past it, right? If it's held with the right energy, you can really learn so much from each other. And at times we've clashed in the collective, and the way we've been able to move on from it, but it bleeds so much into our learnings and then how we lead the next projects or how we lead the next conversation. It's like it's such a beautiful transition to the point where it doesn't even feel like conflict, even though it absolutely was. And I think it's the basis of creating the world that we want, because you can't expect that you're all just going to get along, because everyone has different experiences and everyone has something different to bring to the table. And that's why I love the IYPC values so much for collaboration, because it really places emphasis on the fact that everyone has a different experience. But if you can create a space that brings everyone into that, then you're going to get such a better outcome.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. And Dan, you kind of stole my next question, because it was going to be, what does being part of something collective mean to you? So you kind of spoke about, I guess, the benefits of being in the collective. So my exact question is, what does being part of something collective mean to you now?
The line that's coming to my head is becoming greater than the sum of our parts. And like, there's like individually we all bring things, but like actually the sum of all of us playing to our strengths is so much more powerful than any one person could be, and brings this kind of, there's a uniqueness to each collective, right? Of like everyone sort of showing up and doing that. And I think also being part of a collective, like it needs to be facilitated well. It needs to be, like we talked about conflict, like that needs to be contained and facilitated. That space needs to be held with care and like compassion, and like you need to understand like where power sits even within a collective, right? Within there's and how identities show up to that. All these things I think needs to be done with like care, and HUDL does that so well. So that feels important moving forward in like any collective that you're part of. I've been parts of a couple of things that have just like imploded, and they haven't been held with that same level of like care and compassion, and or there's been lots of misunderstanding or communication issues, and when you've been through something like that, you like instantly you think back to other times there were conflicts and other collectives, and you're like, oh, you really value it when it's there. You maybe also don't initially see it when it's not. As soon as it all ruptures, you really feel it.
Thanks, Dan. Mel, what about you?
I would say that it means that you're not alone in the work, and no change that has come about in the world has been done by just one person. And even if you've only ever seen one person on the screen or in the history books, whatever, if you've only ever seen one person, they had a whole team behind them who were making sure that they were able to say the things that they were saying, to get to the places that they were going to. There's always a team. And I think not enough emphasis is put on the collective and the amount of work and love that you can get out of a collective of people. And especially when you're looking at what's going on around the world and you just think about the experiences you've had individually, that your friends have had, that your family have had, it's enough to at times take away the hope out of your body and to really make you feel alone. And then I step into a collective of people who still find the joy in the work, who still create the most like beautiful vibes, who ask the most amazing questions. And I look around and I'm like, I'm not alone. Like, we got each other and we're going to make it work, because even when someone doesn't have the capacity, someone comes and does it. And then they'll do that again for them. And it's just like a revolving door of just people willing to do the work.
Mm.
And it feels so comforting to be in a collective of people who you know that will just get on and do it, but also will check in on you and make sure that you're good as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I know we've talked about conflict too much now, but there's something about, I don't know, in today's world, this kind of like assuming the best intentions out of people, and I think sometimes, which I think is really important, right? If you're going to be part of a collective and you're going to be working with people who have very different perspectives and you want to have generative disagreements and so on, is there's got to be like a goodwill and an assumption that people are trying their best. And as soon as you kind of lose that, like the rupture can like just grow. There could be a lot of issues that stem from that. They're linked to all sort of interrelated, complex, intersectional issues that kind of just feed each other. And before you know it, it's like, oh, well, nothing's functioning. So maybe this is like, maybe not, this is, you didn't ask how not to do it, but that's how, I don't know, that's kind of what I've talked to.
No, and I think that's so valuable, because I think a lot of the times when we talk about accountability, like a lot of people think that's just like telling someone what they did wrong, and then that's accountability. But actually, it's done really well in the collectives that HUDL has kind of like been a part of creating, and especially with the IYPC, like we use a lot of transformative justice like principles to do that work, and we don't actually name it that, but that's what it is. And we talk a lot about the difference between hurt and harm and the impact of that, and also how to speak to people. And like you said, Dan, always assuming the best intentions and just moving forward through that, and just sitting down with someone and having an open conversation about not what you think the person is doing, but how it's landing for you, because you can only ever speak for yourself. And doing that with as much love as possible, because if we're trying to build a world that's loving and that really cares about people, that starts right now. That starts with how we act in the world. It's not a for later, it's a right now. And so when you're having those conversations, how can you embody that loving world that you're trying to build? And so that rupture doesn't happen, because same, Dan, I've been a part of so many collectives that have just exploded so big and loud. And it's just because we couldn't sit down and have those loving conversations.
Oh, there's so much to say about conflict in groups and managing them, but that's for another episode. I'm conscious that we are almost at the end of today's episode, and I guess I'm going to bundle my last two questions together, and you can answer whichever one or kind of combine it together. The first one is, If you were to offer each other a piece of advice on what comes next, what would you say? And equally, what would you want organizations thinking about doing this type of work? What do you want them to consider?
I think piece of advice, I think we've kind of said that already, like just lean into it, lean into the uncertainty, lean into the complexity, lean into the difference of views and the challenges that come with that. Because I think, yeah, that's part of being in it. And then also like that's part of like the change or the transition out of it that I think is so valuable. And I think for organizations that are thinking about involving young people more in their work, I think I'd really sit down and ask the question, why you want to do that? Are you ready to do that? Like, are you ready to have a mirror held up to you about what's going on and where? Like, sometimes there's a desire to do something, but actually maybe not being ready for it, and they're like wanting it, but more than knowing that you're ready for it, I think can be hard sometimes. And knowing that, I think if you want to do that, and we've talked a lot about how to support young people through it, but I think there's also you've got to think about how to support staff through that as well, like the staff of organizations, because it's uncomfortable, right? To bring young people into your organization and to have your ways of working challenged and all these stuff. And I think like your staff or people you work with, colleagues, whatever, they need to kind of be on board with the idea of embracing that challenge and that discomfort, because otherwise nothing's going to change. Everyone's going to get defensive and it's all going to stall, whatever it is. But yeah, so that's some questions and reflections for that.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that in some cases. But yeah, thanks for pointing it out.
Yeah, I really want organizations to talk to young people before they create these spaces and opportunities, and really, really know that it's being catered to these young people and not just, again, an assumption that, well, this is what young people like, I guess. And also, I would really love to see organizations talking to other organizations and pooling in their resources so that you don't have just separate organizations doing the same work, but actually working together creates more opportunities. So I'd really like to see that kind of like coming together with organizations. And yeah, being more emergent. Sometimes it's okay for things to change on the go, for a mission to change on the go, for the ways of working to change on the go. As kind of Dan was saying, it's okay to start something and then have feedback, and that actually maybe it's not working the way you wanted it to. That doesn't mean you failed, right? What does failure even mean? That doesn't exist. There's always an opportunity to grow and to learn. And so, yeah, I would like for organizations to really lean into that opportunity to learn and grow. And a piece of advice, I mean, we're thinking the same thing, but I think always move with love. No matter what you're doing, I really think your heart and your body communicates with you where you should be, what you should be doing. And I think don't rush anything, just really move with your heart, and everything else always falls into place.
Amazing. Thank you, Mo. And that is such a wonderful way for us to wrap up today. We're all going to be moving away and moving back into our day-to-day and our afternoons with a lot of love in that space. So I just want to say thank you for joining us for this episode of HUDL Up, and a huge thank you to today's guests for sharing their stories and thoughts. If you'd like to learn more about the Involving Young People Collective, explore our work, or get in touch about involving young people in your program, strategy, or organization, you'll find links in the description for this episode. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening now, and join us next time as we continue holding space for real stories, shared power, and collective change. See you next time.